Okay. So, hello. Um, Once again, this is Alex S. Johnson. I'm your host of this Smol Bear Show. It's a great origin story for that, and I'll just encapsulate it. When I was born, Halloween Day, 1966, a filmmaker named John Cordy was married to a woman named Beulah Chang. Sent me a stiff teddy bear, much like this one. And this was just one of several teddy bears that I received as sort of my first birthday gifts. Um, and only recently did I sort of do a deep dive into finding out who John Cordy was and why his sending me a teddy bear was so significant. Lots of people get teddy bears. Um, how many people get teddy bears from a Academy Award winning director who also made the movies, the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, Go Ask Alice, worked with my dad's friend Michael Ritchie on The Candidate as the DP for The Candidate, right? Which starred Robert Redford, made a movie called Twice Upon a Time for George Lucas, which had as its special effects guy 17-year-old David Fincher. He made the movie Caravan of Courage, a an Ewok adventure for George Lucas, which was based on the movie. It was based on the story Goldilocks and Three Bears. You know, and the story was by George Lucas, right? Cordy came up with the idea that became American Zoetrope. So, so that's just why, I'm so proud, to be associated with bears. And my dad was really, really good friends. He was in Scouts, Boy Scouts with Michael Ritchie, who directed such films as The Island with Michael Caine, The Survivors with Robin Williams and Walter Matthau, um, The Golden Child with Eddie Murphy, and um, The Bad News Bears, as in that would be Bad News Bears for you, Walter Matthau. So that was my dad's friend, Michael Ritchie. And so got the Bears theme going on, right? Anyway, I run an imprint called Nocturnicorn Books, and it's just basically it's something I did because I wanted to have ownership of my own publishing, and I didn't want to have to kowtow to anybody because, my voice is singular, and I don't want to, to violate my own um, conscience and my own rules for myself and how I live my life and my integrity, working with other people just doesn't cut it. And I know, like, to quote a line from Ellen, maybe, play solitaire, right? I mean, you got to have your tight mates and you run your own ship, right? So that's why I created Nocturnicorn Books, and it's really, really worked out very, very well so far. Some of our authors, as you probably know by now, are like, Poppy Z. Bright, Billy Martin, aka, um, um, Poppy Z. Bright, Caitlin R. Kiernan is like two-time World Fantasy Award-winning author and Bram Stoker Award-winning author and Nebula finalist. But it's not just people like her or John Shirley or John Palisano are also, you know, um, legends. And Shirley wrote The Crow, right? The OG Crow. But it's people like Carrie Lee Chrome. It's people who founded the Runaways with Joan Jett, right? Who contributed an original lyric, poem, whatever you want to call it, song to this book, which we just put out. And Ellen Mabey is in this book. And the origin story of this one is that when I was casting about for who I would get on board my William S. Burroughs, tribute anthology. And I thought, well, all you have to do is be brave, right? And the worst thing that can happen is people will ignore you or not return your emails, right? But I thought, well, I knew that David J. Haskins from Bauhaus was a self-described Burroughs obsessive. And so I emailed him through his website, davidjhaskins.com or whatever it is. And within 2 days, he came back with this poem. It's called El Hombre Invisible for Joan Vollmer Burroughs. And it was something like to the effect of, well, thank you for asking, and say hi to our mutual friend Jeremy Reed, and I was like, because I initially, I was friends with Jeremy Reed, and who wrote the foreword to Who Killed Mr. Moonlight, right? And so, and he sends me this poem, and it's gorgeous, and it's basically sort of like it has a lot of Bela Lugosi's Dead Easter eggs, right? And so I thought, well, okay, we have literal David J. Haskins in the house, and we're going to have him. He said he wanted to be on the show this spring. Well, this is spring, right? So, and I hope you all come back for David J., right? And so I thought, well, let's we can have David J. Haskins, who wrote, Bela Lugosi's Dead and Kundalini Express. We could do a whole tribute anthology to his band, right? So I was for the past 3 years I've been, really close friends with Carrie Lee Crum, and so I asked her, and she said, "Well, of course." The interesting thing about Carrie is that she, she founded the Runaways when she was 14, so basically predated predated Bauhaus. She was there before Bauhaus, right? If you can believe that. And she's a fan of Bauhaus. And, Jarbo, I asked Jarbo. Jarbo sent me The Lonely Voyeur, which was one of her great songs, with Jarbo, right? And then Caitlin R. Kiernan sent me some a one of a deep cut. John Shirley sent me a great story. Um, and Aaliyah Celeste Williams, who was going to be here but is sick right now. So, and then of course, Ellyn maybe, who's in the house with us. So I'm extremely fortunate. I feel extremely fortunate to be working. Oh, Ethan Morales from Spawn Ranch, Black Tape for a Blue Girl, Vampire Rodents, and Noir, among other bands, is is in this book, right? So it's just like it's it's incredible, and the cover art and design is by our friend Adrian Baldwin in the UK, who does all of our stuff, and he works for Phantasmagoria magazine, which publishes the likes of Clive Barker and Stephen King and Graham Masterton. So anyway, that's just just sort of contextual, right? And so we have with us today Meri Deth. Now, Meri Deth is an actress, a screenwriter, special effects technician, and a punk rocker, and and she co-wrote the screenplay to a movie entitled Death Bitch. And I was just when I first heard the name Death Bitch, I was like, yes, yes, you will do nicely. You will do nicely. I needed to have you on the show because I wrote a well, I was going to write a novel called Plague Bitch. And I just love the entire genre of, you know, feminist vigilante horror films. I also like there's a very distinct kind of LA style, which is very tongue in cheek and it's very it's like having spent 20 years in LA, I immediately I was like, oh my gosh, this is so LA. There's a sort of a sensibility, right? Isn't present in other parts of California or anywhere else in the world. You really, it's sort of, it's gritty, it's deep, it's dark, it's mysterious. It's also a bit camp because, right, we're so, I mean, there's a lot of humor in that, and you have people like Bridget the Midget Powers in the
Hmm.
film. So, so I would just want to ask you, first of all, Meri, how did this film come about?
Well, my business partner and I, we co-own Livid Media and we make independent films. We also license some films. And my partner Ken actually is the person who came up with the original idea. He wanted to do something kind of like similar to Death Wish, but with a female protagonist. So, hence Death Bitch, right? Because
Right.
it's a girl. So basically, the premise of the story is that there's this woman, and she, is at her family's home, and there's a home invasion robbery, and her mother and her brother get killed, and that's
Oh,
her
wow.
only family that she had left. So she's like ready to get vengeance. And there's a like a crime crew. They do, like, they buy drugs, they do home invasion robberies to fund it and all that. So Dante is the guy that runs the crew. And so the death bitch, whose name is Alexis in the film, played by Linnea Swanson, she goes after his whole crew. But then there's also kind of a little B story going on where there's the South Bay slasher. And
Nice.
the South Bay slasher is, killing women. And sometimes it seems like there's a crossover, and then there's some twists and turns,
Yeah,
and then the stories converge. Um, there's police that are on both cases, and they're like, doing their thing with each other. But a lot of the humor that we use, it isn't really overt humor.
yeah,
It's more like intelligent, sarcastic, situational
sure.
humor, kind of like funny, not funny
Right.
type of stuff. It's a little more dark.
Yeah,
Um, so that's kind of where we are with it. So a lot of times Ken will generate an idea, and then he and I will sit down together and talk it out, and then I'll do some writing, and then we'll converse again, and decide
sure.
if there's like a better way or whatever. And so we really work together when we're developing the screenplays for the films that we produce.
That's great. That's great. Do you use any improvising or do any sort of rehearsal or for that, before
Well,
you film?
I mean, we give people, obviously, a breakdown of what their scenes are, and there's lines and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But we don't want our actors to necessarily have to say things that might not feel natural to them.
Okay.
So sometimes, if as long as it's conveying what we want to convey,
Right.
then we are definitely open to some improvisation, unless it's like very like specific wording that we
Sure.
need for the
Sure.
like integrity of the screen. Obviously, like,
Right.
for the scene we have to make it this way. But we do like people to bring their own personality and energy to the film. I think that way you get more of a genuine looking product at the end.
Yeah.
It's a little more realistic. Like, we don't only use like stereotypical movie type people in our
Yeah.
films. We want it to really be a little more cross sectional of what people are, what people look like, different
Sure.
ages, different sizes, different looks, different
Exactly.
orientations, just different, all kinds of different people.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, I think that's beautiful because when I saw that you had like Bridget in Bridget the midget in the movie, I was like, well, that's a very kind of that's a very interesting casting choice. Which obviously Bridget is a star and brings her own clout to the film. Um, I was just doing a little research. Didn't she get it? She got in a little bit of legal trouble, right?
Yeah, that was a while
Okay,
ago.
so because
She's doing really good now.
yeah, Well, that's really good to hear because when I told I never actually heard of her before, and I told Aaliyah, and she said, "Oh, she's a porn star." I was like, "Really? Well, that's fascinating." Um,
She also used to be on the Howard Stern show.
she was on the Howard Stern show, yeah, yeah. Because our friend Oceana Teppenhart, who's like who does all of our contributes like a note from a fan to our anthologies, and is sort of like a one of these mega influencers. I mean, she has 50,000 followers on Medium, which is pretty good, right? And if you want any sort of promotional, if you like, she knows how to make things go viral. So if you ever, want to, I can hook you up with Oceana, and I'm sure we'll have you back on the show, and you and she can, or they can sort of, talk about how to promote, Death Bitch and was it what's the I'm sorry, what's the name of your company? It's
Livid Media.
Livid Media. Okay. Great. So she has they have a lot of underworld connections. And a lot of, you know, it's a long story, but I think it'd be really interesting to have them back on the show, and so you could talk about you know, that whole underworld stuff. Like, so you're in a punk rock band. You talk
I'm in
about that.
3 punk rock
You're on
bands.
three punk rock bands. So what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, the one that most people might know is called Female Chauvinist Pigs.
Yes.
That band started in the mid 90s. We were signed to Raw Power Records.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
we recently reunited, so we're playing shows in the LA area mostly, but we're definitely open to traveling. So if you want to have us out where you're at, people out there, hit
Yes.
me up, let me know. So our first album was called So You Think You're a Man. And the song that we wrote at that time that got us signed was actually called You Skinny Little Whore. So it
Nice.
was about a girl that I had some issues with,
Nice.
to put it lightly. And even now, 30 years later, this girl is still like trying to be my friend and all these things. And I'm just like, man, like I ended up having to kick her ass on stage when I
Wow.
was in a band with her. And you would think after that she would like leave me be, but no. She still wants to play in a band with me. She still wants to do all these things, and I don't want to do it. So she's a skinny little whore. And
Skinny
also,
little
she's
hole.
very manipulative and she screws people over and,
Right.
does a bunch of fucked up shit. So
Right. Yeah.
obviously, that's why I can't be her friend anymore.
Well,
So she's a skinny little whore. And that's where that song came
speaking
from.
of fucked up shit, it is Nicole going to be back, or
I don't know. I wonder if she lost her connection.
oh wow, okay. Um,
Do you want me to text her?
yeah, could you? Yeah.
Let me text her.
Okay. Um,
But while we're doing that, if you
yeah.
don't mind a little bit of shameless self promotion,
No, this is what
Livid
we're all
Media is
about.
we're getting ready to start filming a new film called Return to Death Park.
Yes.
For the people out there that have Tubi, we have Death Park the beginning, Death Park the end, and now we're going to be returning to Death Park. Bridget the Midget will be in this as well. So will Robert Mukes from House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh
So
my
will
gosh.
Nicole.
Those
And right
are
now
like
we
my
are
favorite films of all time.
Well, right now we're doing an Indiegogo for Return to Death Park. So for those of you out there, go on to Indiegogo, look for Return to Death Park. We have some really great perks. One of them includes getting killed by Robert Mukes.
Nice.
Um, Also, we have signed machetes, a mask used in the film that is made with my own two hands is also one of the perks that is signed by me, Ken, my business partner, and Robert. So that will help us also secure more name talent. Let me be able to really, up the ante with the special effects. So if anybody feels like supporting it, please do so. Or if if you're not interested in any of the perks, sharing it on your social media is also great support. So we'll take whatever we can get.
That's
Okay, now
that's
I will
no, that, that,
Nicole.
that's so badass. And in addition, what's really good is like, I started out um many years ago in as a music journalist. I'm still a music journalist, and so I just recently reconnected with some of the labels that I'm working with now. So like Bitter Edge in the UK, and we had Jennifer Tasker from uh, Defenstration. I don't know if you've ever heard of them, but they're a really badass band. They toured with Napalm Death and Slayer and Cradle of Filth, and
That's rad.
she's awesome. And um, so I always believe in like cross promotion, like everybody elevates everybody else. We're all in the
Absolutely.
same business, and so the more you know the more we do a solid for one another, we elevate the entire collective, and we grow as a company.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Exactly makes the dream work. It's all about the dream, whatever the dream happens to be. If it's making a movie called Death Bitch, God bless it. I mean, that is such an incredible. I'm a little jealous, actually, that I didn't come up with Death Bit. But I've come up with some good titles, man. Like some of my titles that just well, I got to do a little self-promotion too. So
Absolutely do it.
so this was a whole series that I created in around 2016. And this is all, there's also a connection because I believe that Nicole, you and I are mutual Facebook friends with the
Mhm.
with what's her name? Is it Sharon Michelle LeVay? Is that did
I
I?
think so.
Yeah. So who is like married to the grandson of Anton LaVey, right? And sort of the curator of Anton LaVey's memory. Well,
Mhm.
this fucked up fairy tale series was created by Bertie Walker and myself. And Bertie Walker was a friend of a woman named Hydra Morningstar, Hydra M. Star, who is a high priestess in the Church of Satan. And so that's how this whole series became officially endorsed by the Church of Satan. It's actually, on their website. And I contributed to
Oh,
Hydra's um, magazine called Infernal Inc., which is, it is official Church of Satan publication. So, which is weird, right? Because I'm not even a Satanist, but they
but
dig
that's okay.
my stuff apparently, And so I created this whole series, and it sort of takes place in the kingdom of Euphoria, which is it's like a dark satirical take on fairy tales. The king of Euphoria, Hubert Longwood, is a necrophile. He goes at it with his long dead wife, Griselda, and there's so the whole universe is so there's the goddess Twatzapooner. Yeah, I went there, right? The goddess
I love it.
Twatzapooner, endows the the females of the lineage of the Longwood family, the royal family, with the power of the pussy. And there's this the villain is Queen was it Baroness Cunningham, Queen of Nair, who keeps trying to
I think I
steal
need to buy this book.
what
I said, I think I need to buy this book.
you need it in your life, and I could send you a
I
signed
think I
copy.
do.
Yes.
I have
Um,
friends who need it in their lives as well.
yes, there's 12 of them. There's 12 of them. And
Oh
I just started a new series with I rebooted it with Horror Sleaze Trash Publications. So anyway, who are publishing my new dark satire collection called A Great Variety of Monsters. Shout out to Horror Sleaze Trash Press. And so this was officially endorsed by Academy Award nominated animator. You've seen his stuff on The Simpsons. If you've seen an animation festival, you've seen Bill Plimpton's work, right? Witty and clever, right? Bill Plimpton,
my. Mhm.
right? He endorsed the
Very cool.
entire series. Thank you. He also did the cover, right? That's
Nice.
Princess Cherry Pop. That's my character, man. It's
Rad.
mind blowing, right? And
Death Wish recently won an award, actually. Um, Film Threat, that's been,
I know Film
obviously
Threat. I know
doing
Film Threat. Yeah.
films forever. They had their annual awards, and Death Bitch won their best independent movie made for under the cost of a Oscar gift bag.
Oh my God, that's so fucking badass. I'm addicted I used to live in Pasadena, right? And I
Mhm.
was like and Chris Gore, I think, lived there. And I was addicted to Film Threat. And I for whatever reason, it was one of those missed opportunities, but he wanted me to review some Hong Kong titles, easy for me to say. And I think I was way overachieving as usual. So I decided to work with um I, alternative cinema magazine instead, and so I did a whole bunch of stuff for them. But
Cool.
at any rate, um, so and then
Oh, I heard from Nicole.
oh yeah,
Her internet is out. And
oh
so she doesn't think that she's going to be able to rejoin because it's an internet issue that she's having right
oh
now.
okay. We'll have her back, and then we can have Ken on the show, and what was it? What's her name? Jolie? Is that Jolie or that doesn't ring a bell. I think she's one of the actresses. I could be
Josie?
Josie. Yeah, Josie. Yeah. Yeah, I just heard from
Josie
her.
Cat.
Yeah, Josie. Yeah, she can't make it. Josie Pussycat. That's great.
She
So
was also actually a musician that my band used to play with a lot in LA in the 90s, especially at this place called Al's Bar.
I know
And the
Al
band
Parr.
that she was in back then was called Pissant.
Yes, Pissant. I had a friend. Okay, this is one of those kind of when it comes to LA, like if you're in and around punk rock, metal, hardcore, or just the entertainment industry, it's so incestuous, right, Ellen? I mean, it's just like it's got the same cast and crew. Like, so I would go to places like the Whiskey a Go-Go, and I would run into people or the Rainbow, and it'd be like, "Hey, Alex," and turn around, it's Terry B. Murphy from, you know, My Ruin, and I have great love for Terry B. Murphy. I know some people can't handle her, right? Because she's a badass, and Karen Crisis, and um, people like that, and Lemmy, you know. Um, and it was just intoxicating, just being at the Rainbow. And then I was hanging out with my best friend for 25 years was Lemmy's publicist and Marilyn Manson's PA, right? So we'd be at the Rainbow, and then and she'd say, "Hey, look, they just kicked out Prince and his hose." And I would turn around and it's Prince and his hose, and they're being kicked out of the Rainbow. We're still there, right? And they're turning over the tables, and we're still there. And I was like, damn, this is, I don't know, it's like living in an alternate universe, right? And there we were at the backstage at like backstage at Motorhead when Motorhead played the Nokia Theater, right? And Sherry Curry from the Runaways was came out to sing "Killed by Death." I was standing behind Murder One, okay, when fucking Phil Campbell dances on stage, and then Sherry Curry joins them, you know? And that was just, these are moments to just, there's something spiritual about that, right? And I,
It's like magic that can only happen at one time in one place.
exactly. And I just wanted to show I've never shown off my tattoo. This is, this is my Ace of Spades tattoo,
Oh,
because
that's rad.
thank you, because Lemmy sort of we did a little a pinky wish thing, and that got me. I always attribute that to my getting on board with New Line Cinema and writing an official tie-in novel to their Friday the 13th series called Jason X Death Moon. And that was
Mm.
in 2005. And so, and I was interviewing Lemmy, and he said, "Hey, um, let's do a pinky wish." And I was like, "Okay, so you're God, right? You're Lemmy is God." And I did the pinky wish, and like about a week later, I got an email from New Line Cinema, and they said, "You're accepted. You're on your way. So, you can write that book for us." Okay.
That's so
So, so these what I really want to emphasize, I always want to emphasize is like I'm neurodivergent. I also have a brain disease, and so it's very important for me to put out the message that hey, we all have challenges that nobody knows about, I mean, I know it's like somebody like Ellyn maybe is extremely private person. I know Ellyn has a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes, but it's never shown any kind of, it's always been 100% supportive, you know, and it's so important for me to have people in my life who are 100% who put themselves, like who put not to injure yourself. I mean, there's some people who are just needy, right? And you need to kind of give them the space boot. But there are people who are really working hard and all they need is a little squeezy hug, right? And I want to be there for people. And Ellyn's always been there for me. And I just wanted to thank Ellyn so much were just always looking out for me. And so I just, at this point, will come back to you, Meri. Ellyn and I had discussed last night about like we would read one another's writing or our poetry. And so I don't know if you wanted to begin or if I should, maybe Ellyn, could you read my poem and then I'll read your poem?
Sure, sure. Thank you. And thanks so much. It's very touching what you said. And thank you. I'm
Squeeze.
so glad we crossed paths.
Yes, I know,
This,
right? I know, right?
mhm.
It's hard to imagine my life without Ellyn Maybe, right? In it. It would be just dreadful. I don't want to think about that too much.
Wow, thank you. So this is Extraordinary Madness for Patti Smith, friend of William S. Burroughs by Alex S. Johnson.
Mate,
The lunch is always naked. That was Burroughs, bearing the news steadily and with a wink at the end of a long fork. There's a newspaper spoon somewhere in there, too, folded like Guernica's horses, snorting acrid verses, Rimbaud spotted somewhere nearby, having achieved fabulous opera. His rude shithouse scrawl sanctified, solidified, rolling forth through Kansas wheat fields, rolling like a family of tumbleweeds, rolling on their leaden coffins of American sky, where freedom's torch sizzles and dies like a wet cigarette with a shrug and a sigh. Where are you now, my friends? The spirit of revolution involuted with the death-spiring suite of catastrophes. Iron monuments to all systems crash, regarding me with a hard eye, triangulating all future forms of my skeleton mailed to the mast of the drunken bow. Oh, Rimbaud, oh, Patti Smith, Burroughs in his fork, tying, stabbing at the gray matter, digging inside the TV mind, digging out bits of chewy pink neon. Oh, that's cool, Alex.
Thank you, Ellen. Maybe.
Yeah,
My
that's a
God,
cool
thank you
poem.
so much. But the way you read things, I think that over being a fan of yours for over a decade is really some of your intonation patterns and your flow is kind of seeped into my poetics. And I think that, you know, Amelie Frank said that I'm your male opposite. I'm still not sure what exactly that means. Do you have any idea what that means?
Oh, a kindred spirit from some kid. Yeah,
Yeah, kindred,
you know.
kindred spirit, right? So I was
Yeah.
I was digging through the Outlaw Bible of American Poetry, and this is one great book, right? This is like originally I think it was S.A. Griffin was involved, and somehow there were two projects. It's complicated, I guess. Do you know the origin story of this book? Or
No, not really. I mean, I think there was a couple editors, and with that, I mean, essay and some else, but I don't really know particulars of it all. I mean, it's quite a book, huh? It's a really epic book.
right.
Yeah.
I mean, look at some of the names in here. It's like David Amram, who was it David? No, no. I did you I think you hooked me up with David, right? Pretty sure you did. There's a lot of these people. Sometimes we sort of cross paths. Oh, there you are, next to Francine. France. Do you know how to pronounce that? Francine. She was.
France, yeah.
She
Hmm.
wasn't married to Bukowski, or she was in a relationship with him, right? I think so.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I mean,
Um,
I'm not sure exactly how, I mean, if they were married or not for sure.
yeah. And I'm just looking at sort of like looking at your name, which is right here. I think this is fascinating, right? This is absolutely fascinating. Okay, so check that out. The contextually, right? Above you and slightly to the right is John Giorno, right? Of Giorno Poetry Systems, right? And the what was it, the Nova Convention, right? That was his baby, the Nova Convention of Ira Cohen, um, uh, Ellen Mabey, Franci, Anne Waldman. So Ellen Mabey, Franci, and Anne Waldman, who was one of the OG, beats. Then you have Mark Olmsted, our friend Mark Olmsted, who we recently had on the show. We have David Amram, and then we have Nelson Gary, who is also in the book. Mark Olmsted, Nelson Gary are in the Bauhaus book, right? And then I don't know all these names. S.A. Griffin, I know. So so you're right there. And then you have to like Thule Kupferberg, David Leonard, and then Leonard Cohen is here. So isn't that incredible?
Uh-huh.
Like Leonard
Yeah.
Cohen and Ellen Mabey, right? You're sharing
Yeah.
space in a book, right? And now I get to
So,
collect all of y'all and more than in the Burroughs book. It's a tremendous delight. Look at these names: Jim Carroll, Hubert Selby Jr., Ishmael Reed, Lenny Bruce. One thing I think that people do not realize about your work is that there's so much besides the explosive humor and the sort of your lightness is part of the effect, but it's more incandescent rainbow psychedelia. Like you're like a drug. You're like it's like microdosing Ellen maybe, and for somebody you're like, it was said of Salvador Dali, or Salvador Dali said, I don't do drugs, I am drugs, right? And I think that something similar could be said of you. And I'm just going to read something a little bit about. Do you know who Jeffrey McDaniel is?
yeah, yeah, a wonderful poet, a wonderful
Okay,
poet.
I've just familiarizing myself with him. So I'm just going to read a little bit of the um, of the preface that he wrote, and which is really fun because it's very, very similar to what my friend and colleague um, uh, forget her name, but she was my co-instructor at Cal State Dominguez Hills, right? And she was the one who introduced me to your work, and she said um, that there's this awesome poet that's associated with Beyond Baroque. Her name is Ellyn Maybe. She's very shy and she giggles a lot. And then I was like, huh, well, that sounds very eccentric and interesting character. And she said, well, you got to check out, you got to read her stuff, right? And so I actually Facebook friended you, and I said, okay, so I've been hearing great things about Ellyn Maybe. Could you suggest one of your best works publications? And you said Dancing Barefoot at the Glassblower in the Glassblowers Museum. And so I
Oh,
read
walking barefoot.
Walking Barefoot, yeah,
Mhm.
Walking Barefoot at the Glassblowers Museum, and I immediately fell in love with your work, and it was just magical, and it was sort of like seeing Guernica for the first time, or seeing, you know, the dance by Henri Matisse, right? And it was sort of like, huh, well, I recognize greatness. I'm just going to follow this woman, and then I got your album Rodeo, what, Rodeo for the Sheepish?
Oh, rodeo for the sheepish.
Yeah,
Oh, rodeo for the
Rodeo
sheepish.
for the
Yeah.
Sheepish. And then listening to those songs over and over and over and over again. I was just listening to parallel universes. Oh my gosh. It's really, you've got, you remind me a little bit of Laurie Anderson a little bit,
Oh,
right?
that's amazing.
I
Wow.
mean, it sounds a lot like, the kind of dry wit is so dry. Anyway, when I moved to Los Angeles a few years ago, the poets I met kept saying, "You gotta check out Ellyn Maybe." After about the 10th time, I began wondering, who the fuck is Ellyn Maybe? Eventually, we were introduced to a spoken word gig outside a since closed record store in Santa Monica. I wondered if I was the victim of some massive practical joke, because there was no way in the world that this spaced out cross between a squealing deadhead and a giggling bag lady was the best poet the City of Angels had to offer. I ran into her a couple of nights later at the Hammer Museum as we both struggled in late to a Jory Graham reading, and my curiosity was aroused. Very few poets find it necessary to attend bohemian events in coffee houses and highbrow literary shindigs. Perhaps there was more to Ellen maybe than met the iris. Did he mean like Iris Berry? Was that a little Iris Berry nod? Potentially, right? Perhaps my initial conclusion was rash and pig-headed. Wouldn't be the first time. Ellen maybe lumbers nervously to the microphone, swinging a handheld tape recorder. And I've seen those videos too, where she plops down on the stage. She talks with a mumbling lisp about what an honor it is. I expect the worst, and wham! She bursts out with images that make my brain do double takes, and on the spot, as the audience feeds her love, I'm hastily revising my notions of poetry and its possibilities. Ellen maybe has played me like a sucker, roped me into thinking she's a dunce, betting my small fortune against her, then laying down the aces one by one. Um, Ellen maybe has been called the daughter of Allen Ginsberg by Peter Rabbit of the Teos poetry circus. And despite the fact that she's never done drugs, still lives with her mom and is saving her virginity, the comparison works on a number of levels. Ellen has Ginsberg's remarkable ability to bring people together, etc. So, and without further ado, I'm going to read this entire thing because why not, right? It's a masterpiece. I mean, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, this Ball and Chain record store by Ellen Maybe. Someone came into the ball and chain record store I work at and said, no bags, a waste of plastic. I said, yes, you must be a granola eating, left wing, dig gothic, postmodernist, watch a lot of Billy Jack movies, Arlo Guthrie type. He said, yes. I smiled. I dream of Tom Waits finger painting light bulbs on on my holiday wreath. And I'm Jewish. Pretty weird, huh? I celebrate Tiny Tim's birthday with a parade of dancing deadheads, some who never sleep and some who never go to the bathroom. His t-shirt said, have you hugged a rainforest lately? I said, I love the planet, but it's unrequited love. He told me, babe, you're bringing me down. When I was born, my first word was Om. In kindergarten, I organized the pacifist to demand we didn't have to read from Dick, Jane, and Spot books. Too generic. I demanded we get American Indians to talk about what's real. And I gave them my nap mat because it's their land. And I gave them a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because the buffalo have been murdered and they need protein. He blushed with passion and said, tell me you. Well, the first 15 years of my life, I thought Barry Manilow was a sex symbol. Needless to say, I got kind of a needless to say, I got a sort of late start at being at one with the cosmic heartbeat. He gave me one of those looks like I better get this girl some Jack Kerouac books to read fast before she suffers the confusion of not knowing there's other existences besides the banal. I put my hand on my hips and squealed. I read On the Road and the letters of Allen Ginsberg to Neil Cassidy and vice versa. He said, on Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, I'm a part-time Marxist. He took out a beanie, put it on his head, and began to chant. This definitely turned me on. All of a sudden, began to sing the minimum wage worker song. The walls are full of faces, the mini malls are full of neon. The bitter bites the hands that feed them. The food is a mixture of bone, blood, and snails. Man is a cannibal. I said, wow, you're the sort of guy who says right on and really means it. You probably only drink the milk of socially conscious cows who voted Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young for president. He screamed, oh, chick. My life changed in 1962 when I realized the Constitution was written without women, blacks, Indians, and poor white men in mind. That was not okay. I became the Jackson Pollock of feminism. I threw paint of outrage everywhere. I was a man who identified with Billie Holiday and Ernest Hemingway. I was a traveler. So, what brings you into this San Fernando Valley air conditioned, intellectually malnourished record store with the exactlies? We open exactly at 10, close exactly at 10, no matter what our karma. Damn, it's so crass you can't even rent the last waltz here. He said, I'm a competitive mantra makers bowling league. We have weavers, chess players, avant-garde stamp collectors, and Hell's Angels, inventors all. We bowl whenever the fuck the spirit moves us. With any luck, we'll be playing the New Age Lawyers Used Car Salesman League again real soon. Hippies and New Age people are like the difference between Bob Dylan and Bob Hope. He smiled and said, do you want to bowl? We are definitely into strikes for the betterment of the worker. We need someone who looks like she could walk into the woods and find incense without getting poison ivy. You look like Van Morrison when you pout your lips. You could be part of the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost Meshuggah Athletic League. Besides, I love you. I started to weep Tears of Boss Mitzvah cake and tears of being the last kid picked for field hockey in gym class. Authentic tears. Nobody ever said all that to me before. I guess I kind of do have Van Morrison's mouth. Why hadn't anybody ever noticed? I said, I love you, but every free moment I moonlight at Hare Krishna Organic Coiffures and Tea Salon. We use no chemicals, no dyes, no sprays, no combs, no brushes. Hell, you look pretty much the same going out as going in. He said, what's a nice girl like you doing living in a Republican administration like this? The manager of the record store comes over and says, you know the movie Fahrenheit 451? Corporate has ordered us to burn it. Get to it. Don't give me your damn whimpering Joan of Arc eyes. Lots of people would love to have your job. I screamed, pig, pig! You are giving barnyard animals a bad name. Cops are pigs. Intolerants are pigs. Bigots are pigs. Everybody does it and says they're just doing their job is a pig. Everybody who does it to someone else knows what they are. This is my first day at the record store. I guess if they want to have a quiet, complacent, yes, sir type of employee, they ought to ask different questions on the application. Like, do you conform? Like, do you care that this is stolen land? Like, do you believe in playlists? Like, do you believe in yourself? Do you mind waking up alone rather than being beaten up with fists? Do you see the government is beating us up as bad as a knife in our elbows, as bad as a slur in our ears, as bad as a rape? Wouldn't we just wanted to be held? And all they ask is, can you work part-time? And what days can't you work? And they say, whom do we contact in an emergency? I said, because you need to ask that constitutes an emergency. The hippie said, my name is Hell's Bells, but you can call me Hope. He said, I dug you. Now I dig your whole being. It's strange. No matter how many nights I wake up unhappy, there's still a possibility of rising into a change so easily. The outlaw lives in a world where when he sees a mirror, he sees a hero. And all heroes put their bell bottoms on one leg at a time. Let's face it. How can you trust money when there are politicians' faces printed on it? Money is sexist. The only woman on so-called American currency, which is really Turtle Island to the Indians, is Susan B. Anthony, and they stopped making those real fast. Is money worth killing for? Is money worth killing for? I ran through the store singing about William Blake's eyebrows and Walt Whitman's belly button, saying everything is alive and everything is sort of adorable. I took paper clips and gave them to loving vegetarian families who needed someone. I took the bathroom sink and gave it a hug. I freed all the rubber bands and I said to all the plastic bags, I will never burden you with films weighing you down. Perry Como cassettes, or even a piece of Jerry Garcia's beard. Well, maybe, but I will never staple a bag, for you brought love. Most people tell me it was all the Pop Tarts I ate. Some people tell me it was because I was a liar. And I said, I'm too honest to be anybody's best friend, but at times nobody believes this hippie ever even came by. There are no lingering peace signs, no incense, no tea bags, no fuck the fuckers pamphlets. Yet I still can't even believe Abby Hoffman is dead. So my strengths and pains are in my sense of wonder. All I know is I don't believe in wearing sandals and argyle socks together. And when I needed it most, hope was there. Change must not be too far behind.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I know you read so stunningly. I mean, just so beautiful and everything. And saying the minimum wage workers, that was just tremendous. Just so beautiful. Really
Oh,
amazing.
thank you so much.
It's really
Thank you so much, Ellen. And so the thing is, which is kind of distinguishing about your stuff, is, and it's a kind of a hallmark, is the your sympathy for um even inorganic objects, even inanimate objects, like plastics. And for some reason, this is a kind of a trope with you. If I were doing an academic study, if I were assigning if I were still teaching college and if I were assigning, if I did a graduate school seminar in Ellyn, maybe, then I would definitely be talking about the plastics stuff. What is it about you and plastics?
hmm. That's interesting because the poems were written at much different times, but I mean, I guess it's just just the things that happen that people get so, I don't know, it's just there's them such a meanness and carelessness, in a lot of the way things have gone. It's so weird because I'm thinking I wrote that poem right before the Karma Bumps toured.
Uh-huh.
And we had a thing, we did a show that Michael Bruner directed called Stories of Civilized Crimes. And for that, if you can believe I can hardly believe it. When I wrote that poem, one of the things was I had to learn to memorize it, to perform it. And that's a really lengthy, I can't even imagine. And I wrote that poem right before I went on tour to New Mexico and Colorado. And I wrote it in 1989. And
Wow.
still, when I hear my work, like I hear my work from like I don't know, like 30, 40 years ago, and it seems like it could have just been written. It kind of freaks me out. It shows, you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure I
It
do.
doesn't
Yeah.
seem, it seems resonant, and it's so maddening that it would be, I mean, the same
Yeah.
stuff.
Well, I think that's what makes your work a perennial, and what makes, what you said about my, the Flowers of Doom, that you know, which you said, which I had to really think about it, because you said The Flowers of Doom by Alexis Johnson is deeply powerful and thoroughly timeless, that you emphasize that something was thoroughly timeless as opposed to um something that a lot of poetry now that's very popular is the sort of Instagram school, which is easily disposable, and there's a lot of pop culture references. You too have a lot of, I guess, counterculture references in your work. I mean, you have a lot of references to people like Allen Ginsberg and Leonard Cohen, and also, but you also have the Broadway show thing, which is kind of counterintuitive. And what what is it about? And then we'll come back to Meri. What is it about, like, the Broadway show tunes that you love so much? Because I know a big that's a big Ellen maybe theme.
Yeah. It's funny because it was just Stephen Sondheim's birthday yesterday. I mean,
Oh,
he would have
wow.
been 95. Yeah, it's funny because I moved to New York when I was 20, and it's wild because I remember when I went to New York, I had Sweeney Todd,
Yeah.
like in cassettes,
Yes.
and I had an album of like Lotta Lenya doing Kurt Weill songs and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. I
I
love
don't know.
that.
It, yeah, I think I really there's just such an emotion in Broadway and show tune music's like I grew up hearing that around with my parents, and I just and my grandparents, and I went to musical theater when I was very young, but
Uh-huh.
it's always struck me as such an emotional art form, just super emotional. I'm very emotional. I
I
get
know
or
you are.
the Yeah, but that art form is very touching and it still resonates. A lot of things that resonate at early ages still, is still is continued, very importantly. Yeah.
You mentioned a lot of Lania, and Lania, yeah, and I'm a huge fan. There's another woman who's kind of a more contemporary person who follows in her footsteps. Um,
Oh, is that Uta Lemper?
Uta
Is it
Lemper, yeah,
her?
I'm a huge fan of Uta Lemper, and I think what's really moving about and shocking, especially when you consider our current political crisis, is that I actually wrote a whole book called Songs for Dark Cabaret. Um, and it was actually a chat book, but I'm thinking of maybe expanding it because when I did a deep dive into the Weimar era, Weimar, whatever, era in Germany right before the Nazis, which is kind of, you know, documented in things like the Berlin Diaries by Christopher Isherwood. And that this these cabarets were really where it was the only safe place of resistance for queer people. I mean, it was the only place of for anybody who was, you know, I mean, the Nazis targeted everybody. I think that's what people, you know, fail to understand at their peril, especially now, because they went over after the disabled people, right? That was the first sort of the trial balloon of how we could um, target a specific group based on a characteristic that we find um, offensive. The Nazis found disability offensive. They found the lack of pure bloodedness offensive. Now, what I mean by pure bloodedness is my ex in-laws, my former in-laws, were their ancestors were on the wrong side of the Nuremberg trials. Okay. So my ex-father-in-law, he had in his safe the blood purity papers, right? So that meant that you couldn't, if you were even like, I don't, do you know like the percentage of blood that like that would qualify you to be a pure Aryan? Um, it was something like, you couldn't have any, and which is ironic considering that I believe that Hitler was like an eighth Jewish, so he certainly doesn't look Aryan, right? He's the last possible Aryan. Um, but so the first they just in order to figure out how to, scientifically target a whole group of people for the purpose of extermination. And this was with the help of people like, Henry Ford, the industrialist, which is really terrifying when you think about this, how history is returned, right? Full swing, history is just, done a about face. It's sort of like we have Elon Musk doing the Heil Hitler salute in at the inauguration of our president, who's a convicted felon, right? Oh my gosh, it almost doesn't bear thinking about, but we have to think about it. And so, first the disabled people, right? Then they went after queer people. They went after anybody who was, they deemed deviant. They went after artists. They went after um, black people. They went after um, the unionists, right? They went after communists, especially they they're they ran on the platform, oh, we're going to rid Germany of the communists and we're going to win World War One again. We're going to make Germany great again, right? We're going to just get rid of all of the subversive element that's caused us to our country to descend into, a a great recession, right? The Deutsche Mark wasn't worth anything, and I think this is where I wrote a lot of poems in the Skull vinyl, particularly talking about that and talking about what's it fascinating. I mean, as a scholar of film and as a lover, as cineast, right, Ellen, like those movies, like from the 30s, right? They're so fantastic. And even in our country, when we had people like Charlie Chaplin, who was his brother was Jewish, right? I think it's so or part Jewish. And when um, Chaplin made The Great Dictator, he was actually targeted by J. Edgar Hoover because being it was worse to be a communist to say things like everybody's equal and we should have diversity and love and respect and cooperation among all people. It was worse to be that than to be a Nazi, according to the FBI. And they also went after people like, Martin Luther King, Langston Hughes, Paul Robeson, right? And the woman who was in Un Buddha Souffle, Breathless, Jean Seberg, right? They forced her to commit suicide. And so I see that as um, well, how do you see, Ellen, how do you see the place of the arts as far as a node of resistance to this terrible crisis?
Hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, it's very important for the artist to, to express how they're feeling, their resistance to it. I think that's important. Definitely, it's always been important. Yeah.
I hope we didn't lose Meri Deth. I know that this is just the way, I guess, the way that this show is comes together. My hope always is that I can strike sparks among my different guests and we can sort of all sort of network together and maybe collaborate. So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And then there's the luck of the draw as well as the people who have to sort of drop out of you know, the show for whatever reason. So Aaliyah um, couldn't be here because she has a migraine. So, um, but now that I have you, maybe we could read some more poetry. I mean, could we do that?
Yeah,
Okay,
sure.
great. Could you read just anything you like, anything you like, maybe, um, maybe, maybe, uh,
Mhm.
you could read some stuff.
Um, well, let's see. I can read, well, I can read Whiff of Wonder. I can
Yes.
read Whiff of
Oh my gosh, that's my favorite.
Yeah, Whiff of Wonder. There's such a pain in the world. Like we all stepped on a thumbtack at the same time, and we can either take a step forward or step back. But there's something in the collective paw of the world holding us up. For some, it's music. For some, it's a rainbow. For some, it's nature. For some, it's love. The world must contain wonder when it feels all the breath and wishes contain. Even a whiff of wonder at the right moment in time can do wonders living in the world.
There's something in the collective paw of the world. That phrase jumped out at me, and I saw it. I saw it sort of like the figure in the wallpaper or something. I saw it like a design pattern in that was intrinsic, an emergent property, essentially, like in a sort of an ecological way. And I think that sometimes poetry can tap into archetypal powers, right? That we're not even conscious of accessing. We can kind of do magic in a way. I mean, the collective paw is way, way bigger than any of us, and it certainly evoked by Ellen maybe, but now that it exists, I sort of I took that and I thought, well, there's a collective paw. What we're doing, what I hope to do, I aspire to do with Nocturnicorn Books is to create a kind of a network that will be strong enough yet flexible enough to know when to resist and know when to cede the fight and know when to kind of fall back and just concentrate and focus on our own joy. And I think that's so important because people now, these days, it seems like people are exhausted. I know so many of our friends are just paralyzed with fear and worry and concern about everything. And so how do you deal with it, Ellen?
Well, it is a mixture. I mean, there's each day there's kind of, there's such a lot of anxiety, and there's also the work, the poems is important, and everything else, music, it's important to have time when you're listening and to really beautiful work and be inspired and really hear that, and because it's really just highly stressful all the time, and
Yeah,
still it's important to have that balance as best we can. It's hard, it's absolutely difficult. Yeah.
I think a lot of us are just sort of almost holding our breath and we don't even know it, when so one day this is going to be over. I mean, but it's stressful to be constantly vigilant, right? Especially for people
Yeah.
who are, who are in the on the a target list or minority of one kind or another, and you don't know if the ICE is going to show up or something, or some other weaponized department of the government. We don't even know what it is. My gosh. Well, so I want to read something. I just I just got a copy of this book, which is called Dr. Theodor's Kiss, and it's actually it's the title is comes from a song by Bauhaus called Spirit, and it had the line. I was just listening to the to this song, and I was just struck by this Dr. Theodor's Kiss was like, what does that mean? It's sort of like it's almost seemed like a obviously it's a cut up, but a smashed together set of images, sort of like hydrogen jukebox. And you do a little bit of that, like these morphs, these when the collective paw appears, for example, that's a kind of a smash. It's almost like a smash cut, right? Like there's something, and then you don't know what it is. Like as a reader or as a listener to you reciting, you don't know what that thing is, and all of a sudden it appears, right? There's something in and then the collective paw, all of a sudden it's sort of like 3D, right? It comes out at you of the comes out of the screen in 3D. It's like there's something in the collective paw, and I think that there's something in the sort of that juxtaposition of images that Ginsberg, when Ginsberg in this essay in um, on what was it in the Blake book, the Norton Blake book, right, where he talks about how he was, I think he was looking at some, was it Cezanne paintings, right? And he was seeing that there you have two that there's an emergent sort of a third or fourth, even fourth dimensional space within like the within the sort of Cubist architecture, if you will. And he related that to things like his smash cut of, listening to the Crack of Doom on the Hydrogen Jukebox, which has kind of like sounds. So, I was thinking, since I was reading, do you know this book? I'm sure you know it. But at the same time, you don't study poetry as such. I was just reading from um, this book by who's that? Our poet laureate, yeah, um, Robert Pinsky, called it's called The Sounds of Poetry. And what I thought was really neat about this book is that he says, okay, this is ostensibly it's a guide to sort of being a more careful listener to poetry. But he says um that, and I underlined this because I thought this was really cool. He says theory, he starts out the chapter theory by saying there are no rules. However, principles may be discerned in actual practice. For example, in the way people actually speak or in the lines poets have written. Um, if a good line contradicts a principle one has formulated, then the principle, by which I mean a kind of working idea, should be discarded or amended. Art proceeds according to principles discernible in works of art. That's a really great kind of axiom. Art proceeds according to principles discernible in works of art, right? So basically, you could you don't have to read this book. So, which is very extremely generous of Robert Pinsky, right? He's saying, okay, say if somebody was like looking at this book in a bookstore and it's a casual reader, and he's saying basically, you don't have to buy this book, right? It's so generous of him. And I think that the same could be said of somebody like you know, Philip Lamantia, for example, that who is one of my favorites and like is really one of my biggest influences, Lamantia. And do you know this book, Becoming Visible?
No, no.
It was published by City Lights Books and it came out in 1981. And the cover was done by my friend J. Carl Bogart with two R's. And it's called a photomorph.
Oh, wow.
And Lamantia does a lot of these kind of smash cuts. He was at the Gallery Sixx show that where Ginsberg first read Howl, but he didn't read his own work. He read John Hoffman's work. But I thought that I would read um, uh, from uh, from from Philip Lamantia. Let's see if I can find one that's not too long. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to read. This is a random selection. Okay. It's called The Romantic Movement to Nancy. The boat tilts on your image on the waves between a fire of foam and the flower of moon rays. These the flags of your dreaming lips. I'm watching Venus on the ogred sky and a continent in cocoons. Soon all the butterflies of desire shall manifest, O prescience of life becoming poetic. And poetry the incense of the dream. A street and a forest interchange their clothing. That tree of telephones, this television of nuts and berries, the air, edible music, king analog, queen image, prince liberty, garden of imperious images, life is a poem someday to be lived, the feast of our hearts on fire, the nerves supplying spice, blood coursing a glow of insects, our eyes the dahlias of torrential ignition. The whisper of the inner intervoice to wrap you in the mantle of marvelous power, with the secret protection of the forest that falls asleep in fire, whose oars become trans transmined only for love. Oars become transmined, not just oars being mind, but transmind. Transmind. Um, all your steps will lead to the inner sanctum, none but you behold. Your shadow putting on the body of metaphoric light. The stone I have tossed into the air of chance so shall come to you one great day and exfoliate the original scarab, the carbuncle of delights, the pomegranate in violet, the sonorous handkerchief of the Comte de Saint-Germain, all the reinvented perfumes of ancient Egypt, the map of the earth in the age of Libra, when the air shall distribute our foods, the sempiternal spectrum of sundown at Segovia, the stork carrying the golden egg from the Templar's tower, Chief Seattle's lost medicine pouch, our simultaneous presence in all the capitals of Europe while traveling Asia and listening to the million-throated choir of tropical birds, your lost candle wax empire, a madrona forest to live inside of, which we can wrap up in a set of secret bags and open on our wanderlust, the turbulent cry beneath the oceans. Turbulent cry beneath the oceans. That's a very Ellen Mabie line. The turbulent cry beneath the oceans. The extinct bird calls in a magical vessel Christian Rosenkreutz dropped on his way out of Damkar, beads of coral dissolving the last motors. The redolent eyes of firstborn seers, the key to the bank of sanity, the ship of honey at the height of storms, through which we sail to new islands rising from the sunken continents, and the bridge between sleep and waking we will traverse in constant possession of the great secret. Become transparent as a teardrop, with no other work but the genius of present life. Right?
Wow. Wow.
Right?
Wow.
No other work but the genius of present life. So, what I
Yeah.
would like to do now is like if you could maybe read like a haiku or something, and I will read one of my short things, and then we'll wrap it up.
Let me see if I have any printed. Oh, okay. This isn't really a haiku. I don't know if I have any printed, but this is quite short anyway. I mean, it's like short, but I it's not much longer than. But yeah. Okay. How to stay alive. Hold a musical note until it covers your soul. Your memory will become blurred. Loneliness is a verb. Jump into a painting now and then. Merge with an alphabet in the pages of a book. When the world becomes too much, remember the tin can line of all who have felt like that is infinite and eternal, like breath itself reverberating on an ocean, taking in the breeze.
Hmm. Yeah. Wow. That's yeah, it's like a symphony. It's like like an ocean. It is like an ocean. You're like an ocean. You're like a poetry ocean. Poetry ocean,
Oh,
right?
oh.
Poetry ocean. I just, wow, I dig that, man. And so I'm gonna read something. I don't know what it is. Okay, so this is called where is the U that begins um the font is hard to read. Where's the U that begins with a tail? Where's the U that begins with a tail? And this is from Dr. Theater's Kiss Poetry for Heroes. And I could send you, I'll send you a copy with I'll send you this copy with your copy of the Bauhaus book.
Thank you.
Where is the U that begins with a tail? That serpentine clings to the bloody roots of evolution. Where is the electron spin that cuts a rug on my TV? A kingdom of quantum entanglement, jewelry of neurons. The heart sees what the hurt needs.
Mm, wow.
A full
Yeah.
and fragrant cutlass of roses. An elephantine casket brimming with tears. An underwater theater with monster clowns from Weimar cinema. The profusion of an elaborate hoax. So that's very Lamontia, and it's very my my obsession with Weimar culture, you know. I don't know what it is, Ellen, but I'm sort of I'm it's always seemed to me that Weimar culture holds the key somehow, and that maybe those show tunes also hold the key somehow. You know, that somehow, you know, show me the way to the whatever to the next whiskey bar,
Oh,
right?
that's
Right? And that's,
yeah.
Brecht and Weil, show me the way to the next whiskey bar. Oh, don't ask why. Don't ask why, show me the way to the next, you know, whiskey bar, you know, something, something when we must die, you know, right? What is it? How does it go? Um,
Oh,
something we must die. Yeah,
yeah. Wow, yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, I'm trying
yeah,
to remember that, but wow, yeah. Oh my
right.
gosh.
It's like the rise and
Oh,
fall of the city of Mahogany, you know,
yeah.
by Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht. And that was seemed and that was a kind of like a allegory for America, just like Franz Kafka wrote America with a K, where he had the Statue of Liberty with a sword, right?
Mm,
He wrote that in the 20s. What did he know?
wow.
That's a little
Yeah, yeah, it's
eerie, right?
yeah. Yeah, I think like people's art often just has an perceptive sense of things, just prophetic, before it's just somehow there in like like in art sometimes that it just has a sense of things that they just inherently know deep down and it just is there and it just kind of yeah, sense of things that happens with art
Yes.
on
Yeah,
people.
and that sort of like the collective Paul, like this the the sword and the Statue of Liberty seems to have emerged as an emergent property from Franz Kafka, and like the work of Franz Kafka was an emergent property because he wanted it to be destroyed, and he ordered it to be destroyed. That seems to be sort of like a very interesting kind of a Jewish sort of trauma related historical consciousness, which I mean, maybe you could speak to that a little bit, because I mean, I'm sort of aware of that, but I don't, I'm only sort of intuit that there's this sort of like this, like for example, Herzi Kozinski, sort of had survivor's guilt and he committed suicide, and like so many people feel like the sense of guilt or sense of responsibility somehow for history.
Oh, yeah, this, wow. Yeah, very, very powerful and very intense. Yeah, yeah. I mean, huh.
Yeah. I just feel that there's something in the collective poem. I mean, there's something about poetry where we can almost like watch the archetypes assemble themselves in front of us on the screen of our psyches, and then by this kind of intuitive connection that we form as artists, as poets, as listeners, listeners, primarily listening to what the earth is saying, what the creatures are saying, what the even the plastic bags are saying. Do you remember the movie American Beauty, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
plastic bag dance, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Wow. Wow. Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking
Mm-hmm.
about that. It was like, what's with the plastic bags? Could it be, and this is getting into a woo-woo area, but could it be that other forms of other forms of like non-sentient, maybe what we think of as non-sentient um, beings are kind of trying to communicate with us, maybe like through not necessarily that the plastics themselves are trying to communicate, but something else is trying to communicate with us, something vastly larger than ourselves. Maybe Gaia, maybe Gaia is sort of talking through us and saying, you know, you got to listen to if, for example, through the ear of poetry, right? You have to listen to what the plastic bags might be saying if they could talk. And it takes a certain
Mm-hmm.
kind of I don't know if you call it neurodivergency or a kind of a having a radar for those voices, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got that
Yeah,
voice.
that makes sense.
You have that
Mm-hmm.
voice.
That, mm. Yeah, you too. It makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. Because like this poem Ocean Song too,
Yeah.
yeah, with the Ocean Song, yeah. Yeah, no, this so makes very much sense to me. Since that might be somewhat what Amelie means too when she
Mhm.
said that,
Right. What about us being sort of like each other's opposite or
Well,
yeah,
yeah, counter like there's a similar through line. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's a through
That's
line.
neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Um,
oh.
that is really, really, really awesome. So, and we can talk about this, maybe off the air, but so I actually think I will kind of, well, we could talk just a little bit and then I'll wrap it up because I don't want to give too much away, and for the people I just want some, and this is also kind of, I really want to keep this under wraps for the most part. But as you know, so I have approached you before the whole burning hearts weirdness. So we just say, which is still, I'm still putting it out. I'm putting out burning hearts. It's just I had to revamp it because, as you know, the weirdness with those people in New York, and so so the whole burning hearts, the whole rebuilding. I mean, it's certainly not over, unlike what some people have said. It's certainly just people are still assessing, right, the damage and the loss and everything. But as part of projecting out into the future, I really, I think that you certainly deserve a tribute and a kind of collective paw of acknowledgement for your whatever you represent to people. You represent something to a lot of people, and I think you're sort of a lightning rod for this joy that we experience from your work and your ebullience and your kind of you're very strong and you don't the fact that you don't complain is very brave because um I complain all the time, but that and it you represent something to people that is even bigger than you. I certainly and any of us. And so I wanted to do this tribute, so the Ellen Maybe tribute anthology. And I approached Amelie about this. So I guess I will just sort of leave it at that. And she told me about some of the people that who would be I should try to track down. And so um if if you could put out the word about this, that this is definitely a go, and we have because I have albeit these anthologies that I need to get out the door. But after that, I can sort of begin to concentrate or, you know, getting people together for this project for next year. And so, do you think you could like reach out to some people and say, well, Alex is doing this book, and I want it to be just like everything I do. I want it to be a consummate tribute. I mean, like the Bauhaus, I got actual Bauhaus people and actual, rock stars and everything. So I would like to have, I want to be sort of not your official biographer, but sort of like your official, like to officially represent you as a cultural force of significance. So I'm just putting that out there. Um,
Thank you. Wow. That's, wow. Very, very touched there. Wow. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I don't know. I don't I would hate to think that we bored Mary or we just sort of scared her off or there was some other things that were happening because I certainly always feel bad, when people like I've never had people actually leave before. So, oh
No,
well,
I don't know. It was a very powerful show, It all came together so spontaneously, I'm
easy for
sorry.
you to say, right?
You know
Yeah,
how Yeah, but it worked out, I mean, I thought, that was it Nikki had technical problems with the
yeah,
internet. Yeah, Meri, I'm not sure, but she got to speak and we talk, and it was an in-depth conversation about her stuff, which was really interesting. And it just how it is. This was very powerful, and you read so beautifully, and then you also read the Lamentia. I think this is fine, great. In
okay,
fact,
it's
it
fine.
just
It's fine.
happened. I mean,
I'm such a worrier, I always sort of think like, you know, like I think always they're like maybe I can do like 100 things right, and then there's the one thing that maybe that I drop the ball on, and I think, well, I tend to be, well, what Grail Marcus said that you were sort of a miserablest, you had the miserablest voice, and I think that's one of the best things ever, right? Miserableism, right? And so, okay, so you're right. It was a very powerful show. We had the opportunity to have a very intimate and very moving sort of exchange about poetry and poetics and you know so that was great. And we think it was one of the best shows ever. So, um, okay, love you very much, and we will be touching base on social media. So, okay, and could I get a squeezance? Okay,
Seemed like it was really meant to be. This was really beautiful and touching. I really believe that, and I
yeah,
think it just the way it went, it was able to go extremely deep in a different way it might have otherwise.
I know, right?
It just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So you're like kind of like um I don't know. I mean, I think of you as my family, but like where would like I don't know, you're not my sister. You're more my spiritual comrade. I will call you my spiritual comrade, right? We're comrades and that was very deliberately I said yes like I said comrade, right? Because it'll piss people off. It'll piss off the MAGA, right? They're like, oh my gosh, they're conspiring. They're going to use poetry against us, right? They're going to man the barricades and they're going to shoot poems, you know, through the air, and they might, land in Donald Trump's mouth and expand into flowers. No, and he'll have a bouquet of flowers shooting out of his mouth, and it'll be like Yellow Submarine or something, right? So, and then somebody will start singing a Stephen Sondheim lyric, and yeah, hanging out with you, I get this sort of like a contact high, man. So, okay, we'll talk to. Oh, and thanks for agreeing to write a Motorhead thing. See, this. Okay, so I think that people really don't understand what you're all about. You're far more subversive than just this sort of like giggling person. You're so much deeper than this person who makes us feel good, right? You got an edge to you. You're more punk rock than a lot of hardcore punk rockers. And there's a reason that Henry Rollins digs your stuff, right? Right? Right?
Thank you.
It's
Yeah,
true though, right?
thank you. It's funny. It's interesting because, like, I was thinking when I heard you're doing an anthology for, say, Sisters of Mercy. I don't know their work except I know Leonard Cohen has a song by that. So, like, I don't. It's sometimes it's like expanding. Like, say, I don't know Motorhead's work, but by you suggesting, you know what I mean? It
Right.
will learn more about other music I don't know because there's
Yeah.
definitely lots and lots and stuff because your musical references can be like a lot of different things that I might not know. So it's cool you're doing so many things.
Thank you. And I think that the people people who just like on the surface, like people might be an Ellen maybe fan, but they only know some some of your greatest hits, like City Streets, or There Are Two Girls, who what's the title of that? There Were Two Girls Who
Oh, they're two girls who looked a lot the same.
look the same, right? And um but I think people get binary about your stuff. They don't hear the darkness. They don't hear, you know, the Beware of Darkness, for example, or they don't hear the Sylvia Plath or the 1 Calorie Away from Suicide. They just which they laugh about, but they don't think about it. And you were able to cast. Well, you know who I was just like getting into? I was watching some documentaries. James Thurber. You're kind of
Oh,
you have a little bit of a James Thurber quality to you as well, and
wow.
I think that he was like this incredible. Like your use of humor is very shocking. It's almost shocking. I mean, it's so funny sometimes that I will have to put down the book and I'll be laughing, I'll be shaking with laughter, and I'll be like, you got me again. Um, but it's really like humor, I think, can be extremely subversive. There's this book that I love that's called Rabelais and His World. and or it was written by Mikhail Bakhtin, the Russian literary critic, and it's about a history of laughter, and it goes back to um, like the carnival of the Middle Ages, where the fool could be crowned, king of the day, right? Or I mean, you've traveled all over, so like the king of the May, right? And like and sort of my reference points, there's things like, you know, Prague, what is like May 68, you know what I'm saying? Like Les Événements, when there was this sense of revolution in the air. This is spontaneously in France, they started using these sayings from surrealism, right? Like, for example, like the beach is beneath the pavement, right? And there was this kind of massive collective sort of consciousness raising, which seemed like everybody understood it at the same time. The same, and this is something that Grail Marcus, your huge fan, writes about in Lipstick Traces, right? How um, the uh, the theorists like Guy Debord in the Situationist movement sort of led directly to the Occupy movement, right? And and I think that I'm really I think you saw, yeah, you saw my post about how Anxiety Press is acquiring my book that I'm doing with Ma Yongbo, right? And and how they are endorsed by the likes of Slavoj, Zizek and Cornell West. And I think that, Cornell is somebody who's kind of um and Greg Tomani, my friend that I wrote the forward to his book Wolf, that they are doing something that is so much bigger than just politics, right? And then, Jimi Hendrix said something to the effect that music is more important than politics. When I think that we're writing songs, you can write songs, you can write ocean songs, right? You can write um and we're writing ocean songs. We're doing things that are so much more important, like than politics. I mean, we could have an entire galaxy of Nuremberg Stadium events, right? And like David and Goliath, a single Ellen maybe haiku could stand in front of this galaxy of Nurembergs and say, fuck you, I'm more fun. Right? You throw a bomb made of Ellen Maybe poems and then it explodes into rainbows or something. I don't know. Or, cartoons or like talking animals. Why not? So I think that this like it's a never-ending carnival with you. And so anyway, the the humor is very effective because it like the ball and chain record store. You take the your your persona takes the stuffing out of this kind of pompous, pretentious sort of, you know, new age hipster type, right? Who's like, hey baby. That's a it's a it's an on that's a recurrent character in your work. This sort of, which is also kind of reminds me of a lot of Crumb stuff, right? Is that you have these characters who are sort of like these pompous, self-righteous, phony um hipsters who are trying to, get in your pants, and they're laying on this down this line like, oh hey, Ellen, maybe I voted for, all the right causes, man, and I smoke only, the organic weed that's harvested from, like the bones of Native Americans or some shit. And so I know that's just your kind of you're having us on, right? You know, I mean that's a kind of an art poetic artifice, but you must have encountered people like that in real life too.
Yeah.
Yes. So what okay, so I know you're a very private person and you don't have to answer this, but so what was like the most outrageous line that a man has said to you, you know, like to try to come on to you. Like
Oh, oh, I don't even know. But the poems, the sense of what I don't know how to put it. The just the vibe of people somehow transmutes in poetry. Like, I mean, it's a sense of the feeling of the sort of vibe of certain people, how they are, but then how the poems come, like the dialogue is just like kind of happens. But
no,
thank goodness for the humor. I'm
right.
grateful for it because if it would be really off kilter, I think, if it didn't have that balance. But it's yeah, yeah.
What was the word you used that would be so something if it didn't have the balance?
Uh, oh, up kilter,
Off
or is it
kilter,
up
right.
up
It'd be
kilter?
off kilter, right.
Yeah,
Well, I
that
think
would be hard. I think
yeah. Well, I think like off
that would.
kilter, you mean like in terms of the power dynamic, because it always seems like, and this is something that I always sort of associate with, again, with sort of Jewish, um, like resistance skills and humor, like Mel Brooks, for example, um, that sense of things being off kilter, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that you're sort of talking about a power dynamic. It could be a power dynamic between like men and women, or men and men, or men and or it be gay men and lesbians, or any sort of combination permutation, right? But if one person has the sort of is trying to assume the dominant role, and I think a lot of relationships are sort of poisoned by the fact that there's a lack of proper balance. And it seems that like I mean this isn't exclusive to Jewish culture, because it seems like cultures like Armenian culture, for example, you have the kind of this humor, and then you have African American culture, right, with the kind of the what was it, the signifying monkey, right, that Henry something or other talks about, you know what I mean, like the trickster characters, right? It seems like that your characters are your your poetic voice, like sort of like the equivalent of the analog of say Sylvia Plath with Daddy, right? Which I think is actually a very funny poem. That people don't get it, that it's actually kind of brilliantly funny, and it's extremely dark, but there's elements of humor in everything great, right? And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that you use humor as a way of balancing, to keep things from being off kilter too much, to resolve the power dynamic in the favor of the person who might not be as physically strong, right? You might not be like, you don't have an outgoing personality, although you do have kind of an ebullience and a grace to you and a powerful presence to you. But, you're not an extrovert, you're an introvert, yet you use humor to kind of redress that power imbalance. And I think that is I think maybe that is something that people recognize inherently, just like, you know, okay, so you love Chaplin, right? We love Chaplin. I mean, Chaplin is the best. And I think that this, going back to talking about like 1930s era, you know, especially like silent film, right? Where you just had, things like mime, you had practice like mime clowning, Laurel and Hardy, um, like it was Chaplin, right? Like that line, you know, like like you were Chaplin or you were Harold Lloyd, right? Um, the Little Tramp, right? The Little Tramp is kind of this put upon every man of the Depression era, just the same way as Laurel and Hardy were there were all these immigrants, and Stan Laurel and Charlie Chaplin came over in the same boat, right? They were immigrants, and they're very much very transgressive, very talk about transgressive. It's the outlet. I mean, there's a reason that you're in the outlaw Bible of American poetry among all these, among people like Burroughs and Whitman and Brautigan and Harold North and you know Mark Olmsted and Dominic Lowell and Ginsberg, because it's using. Could you talk about, for example, like you've often been said that you've been dubbed Allen Ginsberg's daughter. Could you talk about like the influence of Ginsberg on your work?
Wow. I mean, well, you know, when I first heard, like, I mean, I remember hearing, like, I've heard some stuff early by Fairlane Getty and Gregory Corso and Allen Ginsberg, and it really resonated how the beautiful use of imagery, but also about how it was addressing stuff going on in the world. And it just struck a chord with me. I mean, I did, like you said, I didn't study poetry, but some things resonate and stuff that resonates somehow finds its way
Yeah.
and it's just inspiring. So yeah, somebody once said, what did they say? It was like some uh, like a something of like I don't know of Jack Kerouac and Gracie Allen or like like because it's just all this mixture like the kind of the wackiness, the imagery. It's an interesting mixture. I mean, I don't even know, but a lot of neat stuff like that. I love imagery. I also love color. You know, if I see a lot of color in him painting or something,
Yeah.
I love Frank O'Hara. Frank O'Hara is so great, and he has
Right.
such beautiful work. Very conversational and very powerful. And yeah, I definitely and that's just this neat to come across different stuff really resonates. It just has a exciting feeling, it's very vibrant. I like that, that's really cool.
Well, I mean, when you say obviously the first thing that comes to mind is, when you say about conversational and Frank and Hera, and I remember it was one of our first exchanges really where I was having a very difficult time getting into Frank O'Hara, and I was sort of like really frustrated, and I did this rant on Facebook. This is way back. It seems hard to believe that this was over a decade ago, right? And I was ranting and raving about Frank O'Hara, and I said I could just got this book. I had this book, Frank O'Hara book, and I said, you know, this is some bullshit. I can't really understand it. It's pretentious, and you said, well, you got to give it he's great. You never say you never try to argue with people. I mean, I'm sure you do, but in my experience, that you've never argued with me. You've just suggested an alternative in a very positive way. And so instead of saying, "Oh, you're wrong," you say, "Oh, Frank O'Hara's great." And so I think, well, somebody like Ellyn maybe is into Frank O'Hara. I definitely need to give Frank O'Hara another shot. Went to the library in Palos Verdes Library, and I got out the entire collected work of Frank O'Hara was this big, and I was like, oh my God, I have to report back to Ellyn maybe. I have to read every single thing, every single line that Frank O'Hara ever wrote, right? This huge book, right? So I spent an entire week reading this book. It's like, whew, so I could have something intelligent to say to you. And what you said about conversations just makes me think of like, I just like face-to-face conversations, which we're literally having right now. So I think that, part of what is really cool about poetry is that it's a conversation using terms that are accessible even when you're dead. I mean, somebody could read, we can read Allen Ginsberg, or we can read even Catullus, or we can read Shakespeare, or we can read Emily Dickinson. And it's sort of like having that, you know, that poem, about I'm nobody, are you nobody too, right? Where it's like a love letter, you know, like when Emily Dickinson writes, this is my letter to the world that never wrote to me. It breaks your heart, but it's also like there's something beautiful about love that there's something about love that is never really can never really be um manifested in reality. There's something about so great about love that can never be manifested in reality. And it's sort of like, in the Jewish tradition, um they talk about like the the uh the Kabbalah tradition. It's one of the
Mm.
Kabbalah traditions about how God leaves the world in order for humanity to take the place of God, right? And something begins with an L, something um, Lem, not Lemurian, but there was a mystic, Jewish mystic, who founded the school of Kabbalah, right? And the whole idea was that God leaves these sort of repositories of himself. I mean, he might leave these sort of like mines, almost like gold mines of pure God in the world, right? That God wants us to manifest ourselves. And so that's why God sort of sacrifices in order to for us to manifest ourselves, because God is so powerful and big, Um, but that these poems and paintings and um, Broadway Broadway musicals and even heavy metal or Shakespeare or what Meri Deth does, Death Bitch. All of these things are sort of like the the mines that God leaves for us to say, okay, rather than two people being in love. I mean, the best that can happen with two people being in love is you have children and then you die, right? And then they carry on. But with poetry, things like that, it's a sort of like this mine. It's a mine of God where it's also the mind of God in a way that is preserved. And so people will be reading, hopefully, if we do have a future, people will be reading an Ellen Maybe poem or an Alex S. Johnson poem or a Mark Olmsted or a Dominic Lowell or a Richard Modiano or an Iris Berry or a or K.R. Morrison or they'll be reading these things centuries from now, and these are little time capsules. And then you open it up, and it's just like a love letter that Emily Dickinson. I can open up Emily Dickinson's collected poems, and I can say, "Oh, well, I got your letter, Emily." Right? I got your
Mhm.
letter. You sent that letter in the 19th century, and she had thousands of these little things, and I can see you doing this, right? Thank goodness that you didn't like that you were recognized by MTV or whatever, by Henry Rollins. Thank God for Henry Rollins, right? Because otherwise I can see you, sort of having these little bundles of, like I can only imagine like a 19th century Ellen maybe, wouldn't that be interesting, right? And so, but she had these little bundles of these poems weren't even titled, and she put them away in her drawer. And then, thank goodness, most of them weren't even published in her lifetime. But that the fact that not Ellen, maybe, but Emily Dickinson, the fact that Emily Dickinson didn't publish in her day was sort of seen by a lot of people as being sort of like, oh, isn't that tragic, right? Is that tragic? Because I think that's a very short-sighted view. It's like, well, she sent the letter, but it finally found the receiver, just like Moby Dick took 50 years to find its audience. And I think that, it took me like 40 years from the time that I sort of said, okay, I really, really, I want to be a writer. I want to be published. I want to be as recognized as my heroes. But I did never imagined in a million years that I would be working with David J. Haskins, or I would be working with, I mean, what were you doing in the 1987, for example?
Oh, what? Oh, gosh, what me with? Well, it's interesting. I was in New York. I was like in my very early 20s, and
Yeah,
I came back in 1987. But yeah, it's vivid. Because I was just thinking, when I was in New York, I was apprentice at the Village Voice and the
that's
Actors
right.
Studio, and all
But
these places. And it was so cool, to do those. I mean, when I think about even that chance to have done that or go to Prague, it's like those are like just such powerful experiences that we have at different times. I think sometimes yeah. I mean, when I think about it, I mean, in fact, I went to a concert. I was an apprentice at the Young Playwrights Festival, and I went to see, they had a fundraiser thing that it was a apprentice on, and it was Follies. It was done. It was a concert version of Follies by Stephen Sondheim
uh-huh.
at Lincoln Center, and that's like a major thing in his. I mean, just to have been there, like I was like maybe 20 then,
Yeah,
and just to have done. When I think, I mean, even though we're pretty young, we're almost, you and I are pretty close to the same age.
yes, yeah.
I'm 60. Are you 57 or 58? Or
I'm
you're
58 now. Yeah, yeah,
58?
58. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm 60, but look at all the different things, even
Right.
that people our age, it's crazy.
It's
It's
crazy.
really neat.
It's really
It's
neat.
crazy. And then, yeah.
It's
And then to
crazy.
cross paths, it's so
It's,
wild,
it's sort it's sort of it's sort of like we're contemporaries, but we're sort of doing the same thing. Like this is so wild. I would love to get you on the show with Ken Goffman, aka Are You Serious? Because I think that you and he would have a lot in common. I mean, a lot in common. And he's sort of like I recognized, and I think he and I both recognized that we were sort of tapping into the same knows, and he's Jack Nicholson or he's whatever. He's you know um uh Mitchum, or Robert Mitchum or something, or Humphrey Bogart. But the the noir film genre is kind of, I find it fascinating because so much of human behavior is motivated by completely unconscious urges and by bodily urges. And so I find that kind of thing tremendously honest. There was, so like, the it's not noir, but it is pretty hardcore. You ever seen Bad Lieutenant? uh by Abel Ferrara.
No,
It's a
no.
really it's by written by Paul Schrader, and it
Okay.
stars what's his name, who is in Taxi Driver, and he's one of the main guys.
Robert De Niro or
No,
Harvey
it's
Keitel?
the guy, he was in a lot of Quentin Tarantino stuff as well. And anyway, it's just this incredibly corrupt, sleazy cop, this dirty cop who is he's also a Catholic, and there's this nun who's raped, and he's caught up in this sort of, he has a reverse crisis of faith, like he doesn't have faith, but he thinks that that she should want to revenge herself. His faith is in revenge. He believes in revenge. And she blows his mind by saying that she's already forgiven her rapist because Jesus. He cannot comprehend. He's so down, he's so degraded that he cannot comprehend a beautiful, pure sacrifice, a sacrifice like of not of money or power or anything like that, but a sacrifice of the will to vengeance, by saying, I abjure revenge, that is a form of sacrifice. And it's a powerful, powerful, powerful film. Um, it's it's one of my favorite actors who's going to drive me crazy. He's in um, Harvey Keitel.
Oh
Harvey
yeah, Harvey
Keitel.
Keitel. Mhm.
So I need to eat food. You should eat some food too.
Yeah, we better. We should do that. It's hard to believe how it's a totally different time of day. We better do
Right.
that. But this was wonderful and it was really cool.
Yes, it
But
was.
have a great night and
Have a
everything. And
great
this was a
night, my
lot of
friend.
fun.
The squeezes,
Yeah.
squeezy hugs.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Hey.
Good night. I love you. All
Okay,
right.
take good care. Love you
Take
too.
good
Take good
care.
care.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.